What happened in 2001 was the Hawaii Supreme Court came back in what we call the OHA 1 decision, and it held that Act 304 was invalid. Because in the intervening time, in 1997, there was a federal congressional act called the Forgiveness Act. And it basically said that airport revenues cannot be used to pay the Office of Hawaiian Affairs. Because airport revenues, they said, could only be used for airport purposes, and this isn't an airport purpose. And since the Forgiveness Act was inconsistent with or in conflict with Act 304, the Hawaii Supreme Court said, okay, Act 304 is invalidated, which means that we went right back to the prior statute that the Hawaii Supreme Court said was unambiguous and unenforceable.
Yeah.
And that's where we were. The unfortunate thing about this 2001 decision, the OHA 1 decision, is that then Governor Cayetano used it to reduce OHA's income, annual income, it went from 15 million a year to 0. Okay? And that was a very aggressive position, anti-Hawaiian position that he took. And it wasn't until Governor Lingle took office, where by executive order in 2003, she upped the amount from 0 to 9 million. With the passage of Act 178, the legislature approved going back to 15.1 million. But in that intervening time, there was an OHA 2 decision where the Office of Hawaiian Affairs, with myself and Justice Robert Klein as the lawyers, sued the state of Hawaii for bringing about the Forgiveness Act and trying to get all that money back. And basically what the Hawaii Supreme Court said in the OHA 2 decision in 2006 was, go back to the legislature. It's for them to resolve. But this time it told the legislature, you have a constitutional obligation to resolve this. The settlement has two components. There is a past due component, and basically that's the 200 million you're talking about. And the 200 million are for those three disputed amounts: Waikiki duty free, state hospitals, Hawaii Housing Authority, and the interest on those. And the components of that are these land parcels that you see on the graphic, and then the balance of 13 million cash. OHA is the only one releasing anything, and OHA is releasing its right to income and proceeds under the Constitution for the period 78 to 2008. And the important part of this release is it does not affect Native Hawaiians' right to create a Native Hawaiian governing entity to seek title to the ownership of the ceded lands, basically the overthrow claim. Okay, so that's the past due part of the settlement. The going forward part of the settlement is that because the remaining statute, 10-13.5, was unenforceable, unusable, and not valuable anymore, we replaced that with a minimum of $15.1 million a year. We can't sue for any more per year, but we can lobby the legislature for more if the circumstances warrant it. Well, what we learned was that, through the initial, 20% of the funds from the Public Land Trust, and then Act 304, 20% of the revenues for the Public Land Trust, and try and define revenues. If there's any ambiguity, the Office of Hawaiian Affairs is going to be the one that loses. And so what we tried to do this time is let's be certain. I mean, the 15.1 million per year is a really fair amount. It's got historical significance. Let's agree on that.
In this negotiation, we needed to find lands that could be culturally developed, but would also provide a meaningful economic base for OHA, for all of the programs that OHA funds, whether they're scholarships, health programs, public service programs.
Models.
Yes, exactly. So that was how we developed a list of possible state lands. We looked at all 10,000 TMKs the state owned and ended up selecting a number of them for consideration by the administration. We came down to these three. And I think there are some slides. Kakako Makai is the first of the three parcels. It's a waterfront commercial property, 18.5 acres, that goes along the Ewa side of Kewalo Basin, including an interior parcel from there, more Ewa from there. And one of the important things that the trustees did as the settlement process was considered was they affirmed that they're not going to develop any of these parcels just on their own in a closed-door session. They're going to actually consult with Native Hawaiians and other stakeholders for all of these areas before making any plans for these parcels.
Now we continue to the next parcel. We go to the further west.
Yeah, it's just Makai of Campbell Industrial Park along the ocean, a really beautiful 110 acres of land. For Kalailoa, there's no lessees, and we're just starting to look at these parcels and trying to understand them. We do know it's part of this band on the south shore of Oahu that has the highest solar energy potential on the island of Oahu.
An interesting piece that came up, the Hilo Banyan Drive. Is that where the Nani Loa is?
Yes.
The Nani Loa Hotel?
That's exactly it. It's the Nani Loa and 5 other resort/condo properties along Banyan Drive in Hilo. It's about 80 acres of land, includes a golf course and those 6 properties. It's completely developed for hotel uses. You know, the state has looked at all 3 of these parcels over the years and recognized they have important values for everybody, and we think that we can help realize those values for ourselves and for everybody by getting title to these lands and redeveloping them in a culturally sound way that does also produce revenue for our
Let me
beneficiaries.
add something here too, Rickwood. The Board of Trustees has adopted a real estate policy, vision, mission, and strategy. And really it is in that context that we look at from here on out how we acquire, buy, come into the land holdings for the Office of Foreign Affairs.
What about the cash? There is $13 million in cash in the settlement. How was that arrived at, Bill?
Well, that was the balance after the land values.
value of
The
the
land values were based on the recent tax assessed values. And so once the land was identified, the balance.
Or the balance of $200 million.
Yeah, we arrived at 200 million first and then worked backwards.
But work backwards?
Yeah.
I see. And you took the current values of the land? Is
The
that-
current tax assessed values.
Tax assessed values of the land. Please explain why $200 million is a sufficient amount for Native Hawaiians.
Well, Brickwood, it's fair for also the state of Hawaii. It's not just sufficient for Native Hawaiians.
Uh-huh.
I mean, the state of Hawaii was represented by, personally, Attorney General Mark Bennett, who was a very good commercial litigator, and he was involved every step of the way. So it's a fair amount from both sides. But from the Native Hawaiian perspective, I think you have to go back and look at what we're resettling. We're settling those disputed claims that we were unable to resolve with the Waihee administration back in 1993.
The disputed amounts is much higher than the undisputed back from 1993 here now in 2008. But as Bill has described, with time passing, legislators and administrations changing, viewpoints about entitlements or obligations to Native Hawaiians, though in the Constitution, implementing those obligations, sometimes you're having to be more persuasive than at other times, and I think this was the right time to move, and the action taken by our Board of Trustees along with the executive branch evidence is that this is the right time, and we're hoping now that the legislature will help all of us collectively fulfill this obligation.
I'm Brickwood Galateria, your host this evening. We learned and listened. Office of Hawaiian Affairs, mahalo for your joining us here this evening, and I believe Auntie Gladys Brandt takes us home.
Fairness and decency are not extraordinary requests coming from the descendants of the first citizens of Hawaii. Let us work together to undo the injustices of the past, to restore what is right, and to build a future together that we can all share with pride and dignity. In this special place that we call Hawaii, in this special land of exceptional beauty that has welcomed all of us, let us embrace and nurture the native Hawaiian value of aloha that has become the defining identity for all the citizens of our state.